Hey everybody, I'm this is my voice a little bit, so I wanted to. This just came up, and I put a I put a video up a while back about the death penalty and how that Idaho can't get the correct drugs in order to make the cocktail to make it work without well, putting them through a whole lot. And I know they did some bad things and all that, but they end up back in. I mean, you have to read some of the stories, and they're horrific, and it's not good for the families. When they're watching that, I don't know how they can watch that stuff. To tell you the truth, I mean, I don't think I could do it. I mean, I don't think I could. I mean, I'm pretty sure I couldn't. In a situation like that, but maybe I could, but I don't think so. I'm going to say no. But anyway, Thomas Creech, again, an unsuccessful execution. They could not get the needle in his arm. So once again, it's disappointing, and it's just what that family has to go through again, something like that. Going out there, having to watch it, and then, anyway. This is what this could be. I don't know if this is why they brought back the firing squad or not, because they can't seem to do it right the other way. But God help them. I mean, they can't do it right that way either. I mean, it's almost like they're doing this on purpose, it feels like. I don't know. Wouldn't that be I mean, what, the things I've seen, I would not put it past him. I seriously wouldn't. Kitty's playing in her new kitty litter box. I had to change it. So anyway, I'm going to play a little bit of this, maybe all of it, I don't know yet, but it'll give you a good insight at what BK's looking at. If this is the kind of thing. This guy's been on death row for 40 years, and they just tried it again and failed. That's despicable, disgusting. I think they like to inflict pain. That's what I'm starting to believe. Okay, here we go.
Includes the granddaughter of one of Creech's victims. She shared a bit of her family story and what they hope happens next.
I never actually got to meet my grandpa.
Edward Arnold was 34 when Thomas Creech shot him and another man, John Bradford, to death. Their bodies were found in a ditch near Donnelly.
And my mom went through a whole life of, disappointments and people letting her down. And she said that her dad was the only one that she remembers ever telling her that he loved her. And that was taken from her.
While serving his sentence for the murders of Arnold and Bradford, Creech killed a fellow inmate in 1981. He beat 23-year-old David Dale Jensen to death with a sock full of batteries.
This is a copy of the original death warrant signed by Robert Newhouse.
Former Ada County prosecutor Jim Harris fought for Creech to be sentenced to death.
And he was very, very dangerous, and he still is, as far as I know.
Now, after serving more than 40 years on death row for Jensen's murder, an unsuccessful execution attempt Wednesday.
You hope the prosecution, the state, tries to get another death warrant for Tom.
That's something that I'm juggling with back and forth. We've come to the terms that we really don't care what happens to him on this earth because, he's going to have to face his consequences with God.
This thing could drag on longer than he does. Let's put it that way.
Harris thinks Creech should live out the rest of his life on death row. He just doesn't want Creech's sentence lowered to life in prison. He'd rather the state execute Creech than allow him to rejoin the general population and put other inmates at risk. Morgan and Brian.
Abby, thank you for getting those voices. It really is impactful remembering the victims as we go through this execution process with Mr. Creech.
Absolutely. 5 that we know about or he's been convicted of, and countless others that he claims to have had. Yep.
Exactly. Okay, so now to the question on everybody's mind. What happens now?
Well, Creech's death warrant expires at 11:59 tonight. The state says they're currently considering their next steps. Shortly after the failed execution, Creech's legal team filed a motion to stay his execution again.
Yeah, in a statement, they said in part, quote, "We are angered but not surprised that the state of Idaho botched the execution of Thomas Creech today. This is what happens when unknown individuals with unknown training are assigned to carry out an execution.
That right there is one of the things that they've been talking about, that they don't have trained medical staff to actually carry out an execution. Like they don't know how, like they're not trained for it. And then they don't even have the proper cocktail. There's 3 different drugs that they need in order to make it. And they don't have it. They can't get it. They just can't get it. And so how did they get this one? Are they making up their own? I mean, that would be, oh my God. I seriously wouldn't put it past them. Oh yes, put a little bit of this in there, put a little bit of this in there, put a little bit of this ought to work. And then they couldn't get the needle in? Okay, that's some poorly trained medical staff right there. He probably didn't drink a bunch of water. He probably, on purpose, maybe, I don't know, didn't hydrate, didn't drink water, or they didn't give it to him because they wanted it to hurt worse, or I don't know, who knows. But this right there, yeah, it's just crazy.
This is precisely the kind of mishap we warn the state and the courts could happen when attempting to execute one of the country's oldest death row inmates in circumstances completely shielded in secrecy, despite a well-known history of getting drugs from shady sources. You can read their entire statement on our website, ktvb.com.
Okay, so Creech's legal team called the execution botched. However, during the news conference this afternoon, IDOC pushed back on that term, botched, instead calling it unsuccessful.
This isn't a do-it-at-any-cost process, that our first objective is to carry this out with dignity, professionalism, and respect. When it reaches a point in that process, at any step, where it looks like we're going to be unable to do that, that's when we call it off. It wasn't a difficult decision. It was the right decision.
Governor Brad Little issued a statement about the execution. He said, in part, the team of professionals at IDOC was prepared for the possibility that medical professionals would not be able to access the inmate's veins, a circumstance that has occurred in execution procedures elsewhere in the country. The competent and qualified medical professionals present and IDOC officials were cautious and did the right thing in not moving forward with this execution.
Idaho's Attorney General Raul Labrador also issued a statement about the failed execution. He said in part, quote, "Justice has now been delayed again following the medical inability to execute Thomas Creech. Today is a sad day for the families of his victims and a continuation of the pain they have endured for almost 5 decades."
Meanwhile, the ACLU released a statement as well. It says in part, quote, "The failed execution of Thomas Creech calls attention to additional reasons why the government should not be in the business of executing people."
I was in the media center while our Brenda Rodriguez was in the maximum security prison for that execution this morning.
After submitting her name online with IDOC, Brenda was one of the reporters chosen as a witness in a lottery system. Here's a little of what she had
Lottery
to say
for
after
that?
today's failed
Jesus.
execution.
It's like a Stephen King book.
What was his demeanor like the second he walked in the door into that execution chamber?
From what I can tell, he was nervous. He was uneasy of what was going on. But one of the biggest things, though, the entire time his eyes and his position was just glued to his family, which was just right in front of him.
Medical staff physically examined Creech this morning. They determined there were 8 potential IV access points on his body. So on his arms, on his hands, on his legs, on his feet. And under policy, right before Creech went into the chamber, medical staff prepared trays with 3 syringes of lethal injection drug pentobarbital. T-Walt confirmed 2 of the 3 prepared doses are no longer usable for the future.
Right.
So 1 dose is. But he's confident they will be able to get the necessary chemicals for future lethal injection executions.
Those have been difficult to come by in the
Yes.
past, which is why we've had a couple of executions with Pizzuto, Gerald Pizzuto,
Exactly.
been suspended or pushed back a couple of times.
Exactly. The state got these, they secured these, and T-Walt confirming today that he is confident that should they issue another death warrant and decide to go this route, if possible, he is confident that they would be able to secure those drugs again.
Okay, so speaking of what happened today, a lot of people are calling into question the medical staff that was on hand for
Right.
this. There were 3 medical team members in that chamber trying to put the IV in. What do we know about them?
Yeah, no, these people have to stay anonymous, so we won't ever know who they are.
Okay.
They were dressed head to toe, as Brenda and the other media witnesses report. They were dressed head to toe in scrubs. Their faces were completely covered in white cloth, and then they had safety goggles on. But what we do know about these individuals, and this is actually readily available on IDOC's website under their standard operating protocol, is they do have a list of qualifications, and they're volunteers. And in their day jobs, their training is as healthcare professionals. These are people that have experience administering IVs. And so again, like I said, their qualifications are listed online if people want to take a look for them.
You know, this part is what gets me, is that they're not trained in this specific medical practice. It's totally different from what I understand. It's something that, and I don't know why, maybe they're just nervous when they go in. I mean, not that a trained one wouldn't be, but maybe they're able to overcome that. I don't know, but they're volunteers. Who would volunteer for something like that? How about the reporter that wanted getting to report it in a lottery? What is this freaking Stephen King book? The Running Man, or what is it called? The Long Walk? Wasn't that one about the lottery that Stephen King wrote about all these people who if they won this lottery, and there was like lots of them, like 100 or so, I think. Maybe it was 100. Yeah, maybe it was 100. And then they have to just walk. I don't think they're wearing clothes, if I recall. They don't get to stop for anything, not to go to the bathroom, not to eat, nothing. They have to keep walking, and they are behind a truck that has a firing squad on the back of it. And if one of them stops, they're gone. This is what a lottery like this, I mean, it's just what a horrible, ugly feeling, man, that is. Yucky. Well, back to more yuck.
And that they were part of a previous execution team as well?
I asked that question of T-Walt, and he said that he didn't give the number of the staff members that were there. There were 3 in the room, but he said at least one of them was involved in a previous execution in the state of Idaho, and they go through extensive training on IV catheters.
Gotcha. All right.
Mm-hmm. Thomas Creech has not been executed.
IDOC Director Josh T-Walt, after consulting with the medical team leader there, determined that the medical team couldn't establish an IV line. Essentially, they couldn't find a vein where they were going to inject those drugs into Thomas Creech, so it rendered the execution unable to proceed. Mr. Creech will be returned, maybe has already returned to his cell. The witnesses have been escorted out of the facility. As a result, the death warrant will expire. So the state has to consider next steps now because they cannot do the execution later today. Again, they need to go through more of the court process to get another death warrant.
Mm-hmm. But right now, joining us live, Morgan and Brenda together. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, good morning, Justin and Mag. Brenda just walked through the doors a few minutes ago with other media witnesses that were in the room and said it didn't work. It didn't go through. Thomas Creech was scheduled to be executed around 10 o'clock this morning. More than an hour later, that did not happen. Brenda, how were you feeling in light of that and just that news coming down, anticipating this all morning and then that being the outcome?
Yeah, well, I mean, as we've mentioned before, we're there to witness what is happening at the moment. I will just say, though, they did start on time. That process did start on time. We did count about 7 to 8 IV attempts. They started preparing, cleaning the area where it was going to be injected, and they started that at 10:07. Then the actual first IV went in at around like 10:11. The last one was administered, and the officials halted the execution right at 10:58, but we did count about 7 or 8. And we say that because at one point the medical staff stopped communicating with us. They were very great at communicating throughout all the IV processes, but after that 6th one, we didn't really get a lot of communication. So we're saying about 7 or 8 IV injections at the time.
And that number is not confirmed, but it's, of course, what you witnessed. When did they then communicate to you that it was not working and they were going to be done attempting for the morning?
Yeah, well, it was at 10:58. They would tell us when they had an unsuccessful IV after each attempt, but at 10:58, that's when they called it, saying the execution was halted.
What was the reaction in the room?
I think it was just shock. We did not expect that to happen. We were just told that this was happening today, but after each attempt, we started seeing those responses from the medical staff. I will actually note that while the medical staff were administering they were a little shaky. That is something that I picked on. At the entire time, Creech was reaching out to his family, just reaching out, saying, waving at them, nodding. Every time the IV was inserted, though, he would make some snoring noises, and then he'd twitch as well, and that would happen after each attempt.
So what they've said
gross.
is they were unable to find an IV line, correct?
That's correct, yeah. And that happened 7 or 8 times, that attempt rather. There was a point, it didn't seem like he was in pain throughout most of the time. There was one time, though, that he said, quote, "My legs hurt a bit." That's where the medical staff helped lift his legs. He was a little bit more comfortable after that, is what he shared. But other than that, that was the only time that it looked like he was in pain.
Were you able to see him get taken away from that chamber?
Yeah, no, let me go back here. We were actually escorted out of the room before Creech was removed as well.
Anything else he said that stuck out to you?
Yeah, there was this moment before he got there, he would mumble a lot of words. Some you can make out, some you didn't. I did catch, too, at the very beginning when he was first brought in, he said, what appeared to me, he said, "I'm sorry," looking at his family. Another time, he said, "I love you," to his family, and that was after a couple attempts.
And his wife and his stepson were there. Those were the 2 family members present, correct?
So that's what we were told, but we were not able to see them. We did have to sign in to get into the facility. I did see his wife's name listed there. So that's as far as I know.
Were you separated in a different room than, like you said, his family and others who were there?
Yes, yeah. So we actually were not able even to see his family. There was a wall right in between us, and then they were separated in that other room. But we both had access to the viewing area, the windows there.
And in the execution chamber itself, it was just Mr. Creech and the medical staff that was administering the lethal injection?
So it was actually also his spiritual advisor was in the corner at all times. He did step out a couple times, but for the most part, he was in the corner. I will also notice one of the other things that stuck out to me, because it was so many attempts, the medical staff, one of the members stepped out to go get more needles, what appeared to look like needles, and then brought them back in to continue attempting the IVs.
Wow. You just can't imagine what's going through everybody's head at this point in the process. We do know the drug is pentobarbital. That's been in court filings. That is the lethal injection drug that they were using this morning. All we know about that drug is that it had an expiration date of February 2025 and that it had been manufactured. We don't know whether the state got it from a veterinary source, whether they got it from a source from within the United States or outside the United States, from a company that has potentially been bankrupt at this point. Idaho is actually shielded. The Department of Correction is shielded from providing any of that information under a new law that was passed a couple of years ago. So those are some questions that we'll have today, certainly for the department.
She said that about the veterinarian. That just brought me right back to what I've been saying, agricultural, there's just, I don't know what it is, but everything kind of, it just seems to swerve around to where that's right back where it is every time. I mean, yeah, you can make those things work its way into there, but like this, I was going to say that earlier about that, they get, well, a lot of the drugs the kids are doing, they are horse tranquilizers and things like that. And, let's talk agriculture. There we go again. Let's talk who's handing who what at the grub truck. They should call it the drug truck. That's what they should call it. In fact, I might just have to start calling it that. I might get in trouble with that, though. But the whole thing is, there was a lot of happenings going on down there. There's a lot of palm to palm sliding, sleight of hand, That just doesn't normally happen. I mean, you don't pick those things up in a normal, people waiting to get food. You just don't. Well, I don't anyway. And maybe if I dissected every last living thing out there like I've done that in Lindow Lane and the Banfield, maybe I would see it more often. but I'm going to say, nah. I mean, I'm sure it's there. But, you know, there was a few, you know, sleight of hands going on there, palming. 3 of them that I know for sure. Well, not for sure, but my eyes telling me that's exactly what it was. I mean, you know, it's what it was. I don't know anything else that looks like that unless you're doing like the little hands, you know, tickling the palms, and I didn't see that much of that going on. But they get it, and that's what I was going to say. Is like, I wonder if they get it from the veterinarian. I was going to say that earlier, and I thought, nah, that probably sounds stupid. And but then I was thinking, well, it's like how they put your pet to sleep, you know, when it's time. And it's like, and there's 3 different things that they use if they do it the humane way. But the way they're saying it right now, it sounds like they got 3 different needles that were there, the syringes filled with stuff, right? Well, you don't mix them all in one syringe. You've got one of the things you need in one, then the second one has what it needs, and then the third one is the one that stops the heart. So there's the one that puts them like into like a trance, like their body can't, I mean, I don't know, I can't go there. I had an animal I had to put down one time, and it was just, oh my God, it was horrible. But that was the only time I ever had a bad experience with that. And it was, oh my God. But there's 3 different drugs they administer for that. Not all of them together in one syringe. And that's exactly what they made it sound like in here. That there was, that there was still one that they could use. Well, what are they talking about? I don't know. That just, oh my God. Something needs to be done with Idaho, I'm telling you what. I don't know if it's the whole state. I have no idea, but I'm telling you, right when this stuff is going on, I don't know where they're doing this at. In fact, I should double check and see just where they're being executed out over here. But man, whew, those boys like to inflict pain over there.
Correction and 4 state leaders, but not sure that those questions will be answered. Brenda, is there anything else that stuck out to you that you want to note?
Yeah, well, at the very end when the execution was halted, he was just looking up. Creech was just looking up. He kept mumbling a couple words that I could not make out, and also it felt like he was almost in relief, like just mumbling some words, just looking up, and that's the last of what I saw of him.
Wow. All right. Again, just to recap, the Idaho Department of Corrections saying this morning that the planned execution of 73-year-old Thomas Creech, who was on death row for murdering a fellow inmate, David Jensen, back in the 80s, is no longer going to be executed. That death warrant has expired. They would need to go through all proper channels and steps in the court process to get another death warrant. Those are, again, questions we're going to ask about coming up when they have that news conference here at the Department of Correction complex. Maggie and Justin, back to you.
All right, thank you, you too. Morgan, Brenda, please stay there live for us. Brenda and Morgan, I do want to mention something about the medical team. Now, these are documents that relate to an execution here in Idaho, and the medical team consists of volunteers whose training and experience include administering intravenous or IV drips. To serve on this team, you must meet the following criteria: at least 3 years of medical experience as an emergency medical tech, EMT, a licensed practical nurse, military corpsman, paramedic, phlebotomist, which we know is important when you're trying to find a line there, maybe a PA, a physician, a registered nurse. So these people are, in fact, qualified, have current venous access proficiency, current pharmacodynamics proficiency. That means you understand medical orders, labels, draw medications, and deliver medications through either an injection or an IV. And this is where the problem was this morning, and be certified in CPR. So there is a lot that goes into this, and they want to make sure this medical team is qualified. They met these qualifications, but apparently just too tough to find a vein or get the line in or something of that nature. Hopefully during this news conference, we'll learn more.
Yeah, they absolutely
get a
seem like they would
veterinarian in
be
there.
experts, as Brenda said, though, and again, we need to say she not a medical expert, but did notice that there might have been some trembling there. This is obviously something that
High pressure.
you would, very high pressure,
Yes.
you wouldn't imagine probably anyone on this team has done before, unless they were on the teams where Idaho put to death 2 inmates, one in 2011, one in 2012, but we have no indication that that's the case. So this something that could very much affect them. I talked to Rebecca Boone about that yesterday, the AP reporter who's witnessed 3 different executions, and she absolutely said, yeah, those images will never leave me. She said it's never going to leave the staff either, the medical team who performs these executions. I think we saw that here today.
You know, with all the stuff that they got going through there and that's knocking off students and everybody and anybody over there, anywhere. I mean, it's all over the place. But it's what we've been hearing about, you know, definitely through this case. But I mean, I bet you a little bit of fentanyl would have taken him out. It's like, I mean, I'm not suggesting that or anything. I'm just saying that they're letting these people run around, get out of jail, who supplied a young man with something that ended his life. They're running around. You've got some guy in here who you know, takes a bunch of people's lives, and they're using a what so-called humane way of executing him. But it doesn't work, and so he's again going to be on death row. And so what's the, you know, just put Emma and Dem in there. I mean, I'm sure they could take care of it. Pretty darn sure. I just did a video on him, and I'm telling you, his track record, whew. That's an angry man, I'm telling you what. An angry man.
Looking up, at least one Stanford study said that lethal injection actually is one of the least reliable ways to execute an inmate. They roughly say that botched execution rate, a little more than 7%. That can include a lot of things. Even having trouble finding a vein could be considered a botch.
So is that why they brought back the firing squad? So that if Brian did get the death penalty sentence that they're all hunters over there, like they would make sure that it definitely happened, instead of like maybe it not happening in a situation like this. And that just tells me they don't want him around in case that truth comes out, because there is some shady stuff going on over there. They brought it back out. They put the bill, you know, through. Was it right before or right after? I mean, it was right around that time. I think it was right before, actually, but I'm not positive. Either way, it was right there, you know.
Even though if you eventually find that and the injection goes forward, not the case here today. As Brenda said, they tried 6, maybe 7 times, at least from what she observed, and they couldn't establish that IV
hour
line
long
to then inject those lethal injection drugs. Likely didn't happen another time. She did say that they were escorted out before Creech was out, but then she heard that they called it shortly, even just according to IDOC Director Josh Tewalt, she said they were escorted out about 2 minutes before 11 a.m. this morning, when it looked like they couldn't establish that line. And then it looked like Director Tewalt called it just 2 minutes later at 11 a.m. that they could not establish that IV line, so they couldn't proceed.
I'll tell you what, if they're, you know, I'm giving blood or they're taking, like, you know, labs or whatever, they've got a few tries, and it's 5 minutes. They got less than 5 minutes. They can't get that line in there, I'm gone. There's no way. An hour long. Holy crap. That's way too long.
And it's important to remember these are volunteers. The medical team is volunteer based, so it's not like they're part of the state on the payroll or any of that thing of that nature. They are volunteers in there doing this work in a very high pressure situation to get that right, to absolutely get it right. So let's recap what's happened up until now. This morning during the morning show, we told you that Creech was scheduled to be put to.
Okay, that's about enough of that. But that, I just wanted to play some of that just to bring to, like, this is not the first, second, or third time this has happened. Disgusting. Well, I'm going to have to go on a better note than this. Got to have some pretty on the backside of here just so this gets out of my head. So I shall return. My grandmother called these the most friendliest flower on the planet because they're everything about them is edible and medicinal. Doesn't this make you feel good to watch this? I love this. All right, you guys, have a great one. Thanks for listening. Beautiful day today, I guess it will be. And let the sun shine in. The love, the light. Set a goal for 5 hugs today. Five different people a hug. Doesn't have to be a long one. I'm gonna hollyhocks, sticky little things. Beautiful though. Thanks you guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye.